The admin console is surprisingly important simply because you want a UI that's easy to use. You also want something that is ideally cross-platform. So it'd be great if you could have something that's web-based. Also, you have a desktop client, and you can manage it from iOS or from a mobile device as well. Just as many options as you possibly can. For security, just what happens if a device with private data gets into the wrong hands? There, I think, was a phone that Apple had that a couple years ago that an employee was testing. He went out to a bar, got sufficiently wasted, and then left the phone at the bar. And this was totally a prototype. It wasn't out yet or anything. So you can imagine the kind of disaster, security disaster that is. I don't know what happened to, I think the guy got fired, but but you have to be able to remotely lock your device or wipe it with your MDM. That's super important. And a good MDM will also have geofencing capability. It can trigger alerts if the device leaves a certain defined area that you specify. Yeah, and this is just kind of an overview of a couple different apps, MDM providers. So they all do different stuff. You just have to pick one that meets your needs the best.
And we linked to that from laraswanson.com/devicelab.
Yes. Yeah, and now Lara's going to talk about
testing.
Testing.
Questions?
Oh yeah, questions.
You mentioned that the devices have access to your testing and staging network. Is that public, or do you have to be behind the VPN to access it?
I'm going to talk about that in literally the next section. Yes.
Foreshadowing.
Thank you. That was a good setup. All right, let's get into it. So we're going to talk about testing. Is everybody
again?
Oh, right. We're going to talk about testing. That was a foghorn. We've been practicing that for weeks. All right, this is Bucky. Bucky is a real person who works at Etsy, and he's real stoked about testing his new design using devices from the Device Lab. We've recognized that physical device testing is important. We want people to use emulators and to do things in their browser and emulate mobile devices as they're developing, but once they get to a certain stage, they're going to want to use physical devices because you can catch things that emulators can't. So one way to help test on many devices at once is to use a tool called Adobe Edge Inspect. Who already uses Adobe Edge Inspect in here? Awesome. So this is new information for a lot of you. These are the instructions on their website, but these are kind of a lie. So I'm going to tell you, it's still easy. It's just that there's a little more involved when you want to test on multiple devices. So step 0 is setting up an Adobe account. Remember what Destiny said about having that one email address to rule them all? This is really smart for your Adobe account. You're going to need this password later, so save it somewhere. Next, you're going to want to install the Adobe Edge Inspect app via the Creative Cloud desktop app. And yes, you do need both. And you need it to be running in order for everything else to work. And this will be on your laptop. Next, you're going to install the Chrome browser extension that allows you to do the puppeteering from your computer. And it'll put all these reminders in there for you if you don't have anything running. Then we get to the devices. So you can install the Adobe Edge Inspect app on iOS devices, Android devices, and Kindle devices. So it's not on every operating system yet. We've been talking to them about how important it is for us to test on things like Firefox and Windows phones, and they're considering doing something in the future to help mitigate this. But this is also a great case for a mobile device management solution, because before we had used AirWatch, we literally installed Adobe Edge Inspect manually by hand on all of the devices. It took us a number of days and drinks. Next, once you have the app up and running on each of these devices, you have to connect them to your laptop. So you'll be entering a 4-digit PIN for each device in your Chrome browser extension. Again, this is like super pain. So make sure you have like one laptop ready for doing all this. In order to test on multiple devices at once from your laptop, you're going to have to upgrade your Adobe Edge Inspect. I think it's about $10 right now per month. And so we did this with our single email address. So if you do choose to upgrade your account, you'll want to reuse it on every laptop used for testing, right? We want to log in using devicelab@etsy.com, for example, on every computer we want to use for this. So that's why it's great to have one laptop in the lab that's used for this express purpose. So once you've gone through and connected every single device by entering every single pin, voila, you are connected to all of the devices in your lab. And as you navigate in your browser, you'll see the apps refresh the page on each device. It is awesome. You feel like a god. In our case, we wanted to have stands. That way all the devices sit upright. I'll be talking about that in a little bit, but consider that for your testing needs as well. One of the best parts about this software is that it allows you to save all the screenshots at once. So say you're a product designer and you're going through and you're testing all these things. If you just click that little button in your browser, it will save all of the apps that are open, all the screenshots to your computer and a bunch of data about those devices. So that way you don't have to like manually figure out, those poor iOS people trying to figure out how to take screenshots on Android. This solves that solution for them. So getting back to your question about staging environments and development environments, we did recognize that we need to be able to test things on staging and on development as people are going through. So what we ended up doing was creating a subnet. That way we're able to actually test these things if you're in the office. So you don't have to have like a VPN app open in order to connect and to test these things. You do have to have that if you're outside the office. The reason why we needed to do this subnet was because we realized some devices don't have a VPN app, namely the Firefox phone. So we basically went through and made sure it's easy to test in all the environments on all of our devices as long as you're in the office. And as much as possible, encourage testing around the lab. So we set up couches and small tables nearby, and it made it easy for folks to plug in their laptops because they'll be making edits to their work as they're navigating through. Any questions about testing? Come on, one. Yes?
Is that in a locked room, or how do you...
Is that in a locked room? I guess we can talk about security. We'll talk about it a little bit too. So there's not a locked room. Well, all of our rooms all of our offices are locked, right? So you can't just get into the office like off the street. The bum that we bought the device for can't just come back and use the device. So we have the device lab set up right now on one of our floors near all of our product development teams. That way they could just walk up and use any devices that they want. We'll bring guests through. Anybody can meander through and check it out. And this, as I'm saying these words, sounds super unsafe. But we have done a couple of things to help prevent this, right? The MDM helps us know where all the devices are as long as they're on. We also have people over there who are like keeping an eye on the lab. I used to sit right next to it. That way I could at least see what was happening nearby. And again, like we have the geofencing, that way we can see like when things are like leaving a defined area. So we've done some things to mitigate this, but so much of what we're doing is based on trust that it does require that we hire good people and that we trust them. And there's like other kinds of security we have in the office unrelated to the device lab that helps us make sure that all of our equipment is safe. More that you would add to that?
Only that we were thinking about designating kind of a device lab
Sheriff?
Deputy.
Yeah.
In the future, because obviously, you know, it is time consuming to maintain the lab, and when a new batch of devices needs to get ordered, and it just involves a lot of physical time and work to do that. And, you know, even just trying to manage a device that comes back to you broken or faulty, knowing what to do with that is time consuming just to figure out a replacement. So if you can designate a person for that, maybe that would be a good idea.
I'd also recommend rotating through that person. We have been doing this for a while, a year and a half probably, and splitting our time between it has totally worked. But we also have found that like it'd be really great for us not to be single points of failure with this. So it'd be really cool if, I think we're going to start working on that. Deputy, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the workflow of using these devices? So I'm a developer, I want to test a web page, or I want to test a native app, and how do I write automated tests and run those on the devices? Can you talk about that, or are you going to?
Yeah, sure. This specifically is not in our case for automated testing or for the apps. This is specifically for our web developers to go through and look at those things. We've got other dedicated labs for the apps people, and actually there is an awesome talk. Where's Nassim? Nassim here? Hey, that guy. Hey, what time is your talk tomorrow? Wednesday. What time? 5 p.m. tomorrow. Nassim is talking about a lot of automated testing within our apps, so we recommend you going and checking out his talk. So the workflow for a developer right now, she will be working on her desktop on her laptop, and she may be meandering in the office and like talking to people and doing whatever. She may camp out in the conference rooms or camp up really literally whatever in the office. She can also meander up to the device lab and work in front of it. She'll be able to connect to Adobe Edge Inspect if she wants to work on it, or she can just work with her emulators until she's ready. So all of our devices are connected to our staging and development environments. That way people can test at whatever stage of the process that they're working on. We also have a process of pushing lots of dark code to the site, meaning we're able to like continually push out features without anybody being able to see them. So people can test on production as well from these devices. So really it's like however you want to do it, we make it easy for you to do it with our physical devices.
It's Adobe Agent Spec that's allowing you to remotely kind of connect to these devices in the lab from your network?
No, you actually have to walk up to the device lab and use the devices. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Say that you have a problem with a device that you don't have in your lab.
Yeah.
Do you have any way to supplement it with mobile testing cloud offerings? What do you do?
So I don't think we've. So the question was about if we encounter a problem on device we don't have in the lab. I don't think we've actually encountered this too recently. We have really good coverage now of the devices that we explicitly support. So we have like a FAQ page, right, that says we support these operating systems and these devices. I feel like in that case, we would actually go and order that device because it wouldn't be high enough priority for us to like immediately test and like try to figure out some sort of cloud solution. We have not explored cloud solutions so far for device testing.
Because we're considering that for like the old case that you might have an issue with a device instead of buying it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah. Cool. Yes.
Can you only do one developer at a time, or can two developers be working in parallel in the lab?
Only one developer at a time. Well, I mean, anybody can walk up and use whatever device, but per device, one developer would be physically sitting with the phone and using it.
Right, but with the command and control software or whatever, you're going to use, can like two developers use a subset of the devices?
Yeah, so if developer A can connect to 4 and developer B can connect to a different 4, and that's totally cool. Yeah, I like it. Yes. So we'll be talking about the device. I'm really excited, which is why I'm grinning so much to talk about this system. But people can absolutely check out the devices and walk back to the desks or take them home.
That's what we're doing as well. Do you have a limitation on how long they can keep them?
Yeah, I'm so excited about talking about this, which we'll get to in a moment. Yeah. We are not testing network conditions, and I recommend you coming to Nassim's talk tomorrow at 5 to talk about test automation. I knew you guys had questions in you about testing. All right. It's all you.
Getting through it, getting through it, getting through it. Okay. What are we talking about? Oh, yeah. Networking.
Wait, hold on one more time.
No. All right. What are you talking about?
Networking. There we go. That's better.
Awesome.
Like I said, we practiced for days for this, you guys.
No relation to NBC at all. Get connected. All right, so this is actually easier said than done. And I'm going to go over how you're going to do this. Obviously, use Wi-Fi if you can. You're not going to need to have a carrier or any contracts or anything unless, of course, you need voice capability or for some reason you're doing performance testing and you need to measure the speed over a network. Bypass activation. This is actually, it's weird. Many devices aren't going to let you get past the device activation, like unless you have a SIM card or basically unless you have a SIM card, I think. Yeah, we've encountered that a lot, and so you have to figure out how to do that. It's really easy. It's not a Konami code, but it's kind of like one. For this Android, all you have to do is just tap in the 4 corners, and voila, it's unlocked. And, well, it's not unlocked, but it's activated and it's ready for you to use. So every device kind of has this little secret thing. Google it, and you'll find out. One good thing is to designate your own network. You want to set up a network that only your devices can access. And why? Why do we have a private SSID? It's because you can supply or limit the access depending on what your device lab needs are. And if you have to troubleshoot network issues, then it's easier with a separate SSID so that you can narrow things down. These are the networks that we have at Etsy. So at first, we ended up restricting VM access, which is our staging and testing environment, to only devices on VPN. But it turned out that some lab devices were a pain to get on VPN, like the Firefox OS just didn't have an option at all for that. So we created an SSID to allow access to VMs just for these devices. Problems. Always with the problems. you can expect to encounter this. We noticed a bunch of different symptoms, such as decrease in wireless range with our devices. There was a decrease in data throughput. Sometimes we had intermittent or dropped Wi-Fi connections. Or there was difficulty pairing with Bluetooth. And this is because of our frenemy, I shall call signal-to-noise ratio. So all of these symptoms stemmed from signal-to-noise ratio being too low on the 2.4 gigahertz wireless band. And just to give you an idea how commonly this is used, your microwave oven, your garage door opener, those operate on this band. So you can imagine how crowded this band can become. But interference can be caused by a lot of different devices using that band in close proximity. So in a typical office environment, you're going to definitely encounter this to some respect. There was one interesting Intel white paper that discovered that USB 3.0 devices, such as an external hard drive, ended up causing noticeable degradation in wireless performance. So an example would be if you had a wireless mouse that you were using with your laptop, and you also had a USB 3.0 hard drive plugged into it, you might notice that your mouse is behaving weird, jagged, loss of smoothness, all that stuff. And sadly, until the technology improves, there aren't a whole lot of solutions. You'd think that with all the symptoms I mentioned before that maybe you'd want to boost the signal strength, but in our office, the opposite ended up being true. It turned out that the signal strength was too strong and ended up causing an overlap in signal, which resulted in the interference. So again, those troubleshooting skills are going to come in handy. Other things you can try if you're experiencing this problem is just get closer to the AP. Try to limit the amount of devices that are confined in a small space. And you can try playing around with different channels. There actually are only 3 that 2.4 can operate on. So while I can't give you many tips on solving these problems, I just wanted to let you know that there are things to watch out for. You're not alone. So in order to make it up to you, there's a really fun section coming up about RFID, and
we don't have a jingle for that one.
Yeah, we didn't.
Next time.
Yeah. So we used RFID in making our device checkout system, and it's awesome because it's easier for us to track devices than just using plain old pen and paper signouts. This doesn't look like much, but it's the guts of what our RFID checkout system looks like. It's actually a stump, which I'll explain in a second. That's just the innards. So how can you build your own? Well, first, what is RFID? It stands for radio frequency identification, and I just can't. So according to Wikipedia, wireless non-contact use of radio frequency electromagnetic fields to transfer data. Thanks, Wikipedia. RFID is used in tons of things that we take for granted. My dog here, Wizard, that's Wizard, he has an RFID implant. And so if he ever gets lost, he can get found by somebody in an animal shelter or a vet can scan him and find out how to get in touch with me. One of the first places that you probably encountered RFID was on CD packaging, if anybody remembers what that is. So, and then how many of you have a car that has like an Easy Pass or something? Yes. So some cities have them as subway passes that you can just tap at the turnstile instead of swiping it. And it's cool because of their ability to store data so efficiently. RFID can basically tabulate the cost of tolls and fares and deduct the cost electronically from the amount of money that the users can place on the card. So it's useful because it's time-saving. Rather than waiting to pay at the toll booth, you can just drive on through, and it picks up that RFID embedded pass and uses it like a debit card. And there are 2 different versions of RFID, high or low frequency, or otherwise known as active or passive. And high frequency is going to have its own power source. So the advantage of these tags is that the reader can be much further away and still get the signal. And low frequency uses inductive coupling, but we like to call it magic. And they basically get woken up by the reader, and then they spit out data that's preset on the tags when you buy them. We used our employee badges. The device tags were low frequency, but it also happened that our employee badges were also low frequency. So that meant that we could use the same reader for both. And that was handy, and since everybody at Etsy already has their employee badge, it made sense to integrate this with our system. But why is it useful? Well, it links to the check-in and check-out links to the employees, so you know who has a device if you're looking for it. It's also a time saver. Instead of having to find a writing utensil, manually check something out, just takes 2 seconds. It can also provide you with stats and trends. And it can be less expensive than paying for, say, a third-party service for a checkout system. Most passive RFID tags cost between 7 to 20 cents each. Is that right, Corey? Ish? Okay. So what do you need? Well, the best, most first ingredient is our office hackers, and they're sitting in the front row right here.
There they are.
Right there, right there. Corey and Eric. Yay. So you can't have them. They're ours. Get your own. Or teach yourself how to do it. So then you're going to need RFID tags, and those are what you attach to your devices. Those run around $2 a tag. Then your RFID reader. The RFID reader is about $30, I think, and they bought it used on eBay. That just shows the checkout system, which is really mesmerizing. Then you'll need Raspberry Pi, which costs about $30. And then other miscellaneous things like LCD screen, keyboard, cables. I think combined those ended up costing around $50. And our stump, which basically it just houses all the cables and the ugly stuff. We thought it would be cool to support one of our Etsy sellers, and we asked Trish Check of Timid Monsters to custom make this for us. That was around $200, obviously the most expensive part of the whole setup, and that was completely optional. And yeah, we have this saying whenever people check in or out a device is just bump the stump. It's really catchy. So for the RFID reader, this is just a diagram about how everything's connected. But it goes from the Raspberry Pi via GPIO using Hogan protocol, and then to USB power to the wall. And also the keyboard and the little LCD screen are plugged in, powered by USB. All of that's plugged into Ethernet with a static IP address. And in case you're interested in how the Raspberry Pi was programmed, we used C for GPIO and Python. And there's a really in-depth, amazing blog post that Corey and Eric did about this, and you can just get to it from laraswanson.com/devicelab. I recommend reading it. It's lots of information for your brain. So how did we use that data? Well, stats. We love stats at Etsy, of course. And I can see here what devices are checked out, what system it's running, who has it, when it was checked out, and all that stuff. So that's super handy. And I guess, yeah, at the time of this screen grab, the Galaxy S4 had 36 checkouts. Problems. Always, forever. We encountered interference. So like other wireless devices, RFID tags broadcast over a portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, and the exact frequency is variable. So it can be chosen to kind of avoid interference with other electronics. And sometimes RFID badges can couple with metal-backed devices. That was an interesting issue that Corey worked around by buying a high-frequency tag, basically ripping off the anti-metal backing, and then that was essentially hacked into a low-frequency tag. There's a thing known as card clash, which is when you have conflicts with other low-frequency RFID devices, objects. And so, for example, if you had like a Zipcar card in your wallet, and you also had your employee badge, you swipe that, basically it can cause a data misread to happen. And this isn't really a problem per se, but we had to kind of figure out how to identify input, like how would the stump differentiate between your badge or the RFID tag that we put on it. So Corey and Eric did this by programming their script so it differentiated by the number of bits, which I thought was ingenious. And the device IDs and the badge IDs basically had different numbers of bits, and that's how they programmed it to identify. And that's all I can say without getting super secret FBI about things. Are there any questions? Wow, that's stunned, are you? Hi.
Have you figured out how to test devices, like how to enable airplane mode or how to throttle the Wi-Fi network connection to see how your apps load?
So we have yet to be testing across different kinds of networks. We've mostly been testing over Wi-Fi, but that's something we'll be testing in the future. Right now, we do it over the web and use synthetic testing to help us like shape networks.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Yeah, I can.
So any kind of concurrency problems that you encountered, maybe when you point to devices at the same test, for example, over the same VLAN, either saturated or race conditions or something.
Oh, like if you try to bump two devices to the stump? I think we programmed for this. So if you bump a device and then bump another device, no, we haven't had problems. I think you guys wrote around this, where like whatever the last thing you bumped was, that's what will check out when you tap your ID.
Yeah, and isn't there's like a timeout period as well, which, yeah.
We forgot to mention, and I will mention now, that this is all open sourced too. So if you go to laraswanson.com/devicelab, you can look at all of the code that these guys wrote, and for instance, the timeout and all the fail safes that they built into it. I'm so sorry. I'm from New Jersey. I speak really fast. If you go to laraswanson.com/devicelab, you can find the open sourced GitHub project where these guys put all the code for the RFID reader. laraswanson.com/devicelab. Yes. Also, yeah, I think I tweeted it yesterday. So if you go to @LaraSwanson, you can find all the links there. Next and last.
Next and last.
You want to help me with this last one?
Oh, yeah.
Now we're going to talk about
User experience.
So building the device lab is all about usability. You can think of your designers and your developers as your end users. So what can you do to make the device lab as intuitive as possible for your coworkers? This will help both you and your users in the long run by saving you a lot of headaches. Who wants to guess? I want to take some audience participation here about some surprises that Destiny and I have encountered when we've visited the device lab. What surprises have we found? Yes. Browser history. Yes. Correct. More. There's like a million. Please bring it. Reset passwords. Absolutely. Yeah. Jailbreaking. Yep. Totally. Keep them coming. Take one more. TMI from Facebook. There's even a screenshot of that coming up. People have done a lot of things. They've connected their personal accounts, their email addresses, their Facebook profiles. They've upgraded things. They've changed the wallpaper on things. They've changed the passcodes on things. They've broken them and put them back into the lab. They have removed the batteries and put them back into charge. They have done a lot of really interesting, surprising things. And these are with like really smart, loving, respectable coworkers. Like these are people who know us and respect us, and they still do these things. So if it can happen to us at Etsy, it will happen to you. So I have a bunch of tips for you on how to try to prevent some of these surprises from happening. The first is to make it easy to plug devices back in. This sounds so stupid, right? But like if you make it super easy for people to come back and place the device where it should be, they're gonna do it. So we implemented cable drops and hooks and ties. Cable drops, these little clamps that you can put on the backs of shelves, just to make sure that the cables all stay in place and are hanging ready to be plugged back in. We also group cables by power strip and we note which cables are proprietary for our own use. That way we can understand if things go walking away, or if we're just plugging things back in, what devices they belong to. We also indicate which devices may overdraw. This helps us. We also needed to make stealing cables hard. We did this in a couple of ways. We hid the cords behind the shelves. We also hid the power strips, and we also used cable ties. One of the things that we noticed is if cables weren't dangling at the right height, people wouldn't plug things back in. They would rest the devices and never make that extra 3 millimeters of effort to plug it back in. So we both clipped them in place so you can't get them out, but we clipped them in place to make it easy to plug things back in as well. So in V2, power strips were really accessible so that we could watch the timed power supply for greenness. But in V3, we hid the power strips so that users couldn't easily steal cables, and the lab ends up looking more organized. So we still made it easy for our team to go in and recable devices, but we made it much harder for people to steal them. You should make it easy as possible to return devices and test things all at once. And this is what I was hinting at earlier with Adobe Edge Inspect. Purchase a range of stand sizes. We bought all of ours from Etsy, so I would definitely recommend you going and scouring the Etsy website and supporting local sellers in your area who are making phone stands. Some, like the wire ones, looked a little bit more disorganized, and others, like the beautiful wooden ones, made it look really sleek. This is going to sound silly, but if you consider the aesthetics of your lab, you're going to make a more beautiful and inviting lab, and people are going to want to use it. We also learned that stands are not one size fits all, so test handset stands if you have thicker or older devices because they're not going to necessarily work. Or you can just build them into your lab like we did in V3 because we found that they got bumped around or people would just lay devices back down on them instead of standing them upright, which just drove us insane. So V3, we built a 5-degree angle for our shelving so that all of our devices can lie upright and we don't need additional stands. The gap for the devices is felt lined in our case, so anytime you guys visit Brooklyn, please come and check out our device lab. I like to show it off. But we made it wide enough to accommodate a range of device sizes. I also recommend giving people things to steal and making it really clear that that's what they're there for. So from left to right, it says other cables. Borrow these micro USB cables, iOS cables and USB power adapters, and screen wipes, which I'm pretty sure Destiny and I are the only people who actually clean devices, but that's okay. But this has significantly helped. We probably restock these cables once a quarter. Next, I recommend grouping your devices. So there are many ways to organize your devices. Just be consistent. So you can group by size. So here's all of our handsets. Here's all of our large tablets. You can group by operating system. Here are all of the Android devices. Here's all of our iOS devices. And then we recommend putting all of your unique devices together in a way that makes them look really shiny and prominent. People will walk up to the lab and be like, oh, this is a Firefox phone. Let me just check this out for a second. And it actually gets people using the lab. Make it easy to match devices back to their home base. People don't read. They scan. And they vaguely look at shapes and whatever it is on and they just kind of throw it at the lab. So what we did was we labeled the back of the device to match the front of the shelf. It literally says the same thing in the same color, and it makes it easier for people to not even have to think as they're returning devices. We also color-coded by operating system, so all the green Android labels are in one place. It makes it easier for people who don't have color blindness to walk up and say, okay, I know where all of my iOS devices are. So for each device, label the device name and its ID number. In this case, it's a 4-digit asset number. The screen resolution and pixel density. This will help people testing responsive web designs know which devices they're going to want to check out and play with. And also the operating system version. Let's say you're trying to troubleshoot a bug that's on Android 2.4.4. You can walk up to the lab and know at a glance which ones are most appropriate for you to test on. We used to have them all as library cards before we implemented the RFID reader, and that sat underneath each device. Also color-coded by operating system because we're a little type A. Now we have this gorgeous thing, and as Destiny was talking about, we can see at a glance what the operating system version numbers are. We can see what's being checked out and for how long. This helps us for so many different things, but it also helps developers know what's available in the lab and what they can go and check out. Another usability tip is to not tell anybody the passwords to anything except for the passcodes. So everybody should know what the number is to type in to unlock a device, but don't tell anybody what the App Store passwords are, what the email passwords are, or the Wi-Fi network password if you've implemented a subnet like we did. So this is to prevent people from downloading anything you don't really want them to, or, well, doing very miscellaneous, surprising things that we didn't expect. People will circumvent this, but if you can try to prevent this from happening, it'll save you some headaches. Another thing we recommend is to check the lab regularly. Regularly can mean like once a week, maybe once every other week, but please don't go longer than that because you will find some surprises. The first thing I would recommend you checking in on is that everything's plugged in and charging. I don't know how many times we've gone up to the lab and that sad power cord is dangling above a device and just needs to be plugged in. So check to make sure that they're actually actively charging. Or it may be plugged in, but not turning on because, again, someone stole a battery. I don't understand why. Borrow, yeah. Well, what's funny is then, like last week, Destiny and I found another Samsung battery in the lab in one of those crates, but it's not the one that was stolen. So we don't even know what is happening. Yeah, we don't know. Next, check for missing devices. People, I mean, bump the stump is real fun, but people will just walk away with things occasionally, as fun as it humanly is. So just go ahead and check in every so often to make sure that there's nothing that's unaccounted for. Here's that Facebook screenshot. This happens more often than I'd like to admit. People will connect their personal accounts to our devices and leave them running, and I get to know them really intimately via their messaging history as I'm trying to desperately delete their account from our devices. So unlock them. It's not enough to just walk up there and like check and make sure everything is powered. You have to unlock it and make sure that the Wi-Fi network hasn't changed. Make sure the operating system hasn't been upgraded. Make sure people haven't installed things you really don't want them to. All right, more usability tips. Document all this stuff, right? Make it easy for people to understand how to unlock devices, how to test on them, how to take screenshots, and how to check email. All of these things are really important. Having, in our case, like a wiki page that's easily accessible and we mention right next to the lab is really helpful for people, especially first-time users. As Destiny was mentioning, we set up a common email address on all these devices. We labeled the default email client and installed any other apps that might be used by our end users, and we installed those as well and hooked it up to our Device Lab email account. That way our marketing teams can test and make sure that our emails are looking good across devices. You'll need to remind people all of the time, like all of the time, to not upgrade stuff, don't install stuff, please don't mess all this stuff up. We have the wallpapers, we have reminders next to the lab, like on the wall. We have everything, all of our documentation. We just like spam people with these reminders. I recommend doing this as well because, again, it counts. And as Destiny covered, we had the library card in V1 to make it easier for people to check out devices, and in V2, it's the RFID tags on all the devices. And make it easy to test. Again, having that laptop that's dedicated and sitting in the lab will help make sure people can test using Adobe Edge Inspect on their VMs or whatever it is they're working with. Make it as easy as humanly possible to collaborate with other people. When we first installed the lab, we were really hurting for mobile web adoption across Etsy. I was originally the mobile web engineering manager, and we wanted to make sure that there was more coverage and more people working on the mobile website. So what we did is we made it really easy for people to sit next to each other and learn from each other. We started to see people like share knowledge with each other as they were working in the lab. So make sure that there's nearby long tables, make sure that there are outlets, because people otherwise will unplug your devices so they can plug in their laptops. And make sure that people don't have to walk back to their desks to do work. As I mentioned earlier, an aesthetically pleasing device lab is inviting, and people will want to use it. New hires see it on their tour and want to check it out. No one wants to work near clutter, right? Like you don't, I don't. We want to work near this awesome shiny thing. So the more organized it is, the more that they'll put stuff back, and the more likely they will be to use it. All right, so what has our device lab looked like in terms of organization? In V2, with our bookshelves, we had all of our unique devices across the top. Then we had all of our iOS devices, then our Kindles and Androids, and some Android handsets, and then we put all of our crates and power on the bottom. We used cable drops on the backs of shelves to keep all of our cables in place. We used those library cards and washi tape. Washi tape is basically colorful masking tape that you can also buy on Etsy. And we use different height shelves so that we can accommodate different ranges of devices. In V3, again, we had our unique devices across the top. On the left, on the second shelf, we had Kindles, and on the right, iOS tablets. Then Android and iOS handsets on the bottom 2 shelves. And then at the very last, crates, miscellaneous, and a Dell Latitude. We hid all of our cables and power behind the shelving in this version, and we had this internal dashboard that you guys have seen for device information and checkouts, and again, the differently hidden shelves. And that brings us to the very end. Any more questions? Yes. We use Confluence all across Etsy for our documentation. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned checking whether things have been upgraded on devices. Doesn't MDM not let you check that?
Yes, our new MDM, which we just installed last week.
Yeah, seriously, last week.
Yeah.
So we haven't even gotten to enjoy all the fruits
Yeah,
of
but
our
yeah,
labor,
we are really
but it does,
thrilled
yeah.
about installing AirWatch just because now I don't have to walk up to the lab to check to make sure people haven't upgraded things. Yeah, yes. Etsy's really, there is no blueprint for it. We should open source the blueprint for this. Our awesome facilities tab built this for us. Yeah, team, yeah.
And maybe I missed it, but did you say if you limited the amount of time that someone can check it out?
Thank you, I didn't get back to that. So I watch it personally to see how long people have checked things out for, and then I will walk up to them individually to ask them. We're looking at automating this as well. I don't know what a right time is for, like, how long is too long? I feel like a week is too long, frankly. Like, that's when you should start to check things out. 3 weeks. At 3 weeks, that device is gone. Yeah, in my experience at Etsy, yeah. Yeah. More. Yes?
I was checking like 10 devices at a time or something.
Mm-hmm.
To go unlock each one separately and then turn like cast from the laptop to the device.
Yeah, just like any device, you'd have to like passcode it and then open up the app. No, yeah, unfortunately. Yes. Oh. Maybe you could talk about that.
That was a lot. I guess I'll break it down into what I just kind of heard. It sounds like you're just asking, how MDM plays into our existing systems and how it might work into the future.
We're starting to use it for books, actually. So we have a number of little libraries of books within Etsy. So I think that the ops hackers are talking about building RFID readers into the physical libraries that we have in the office. Yeah. But in terms of when an employee leaves and they've got a device, we've got a different system for checking out those devices and retiring those. Yeah.
Yeah. So we really are in the super beginning stages of MDM. That's something that we're looking into for not just the device lab, but for the entire company. And can't say whether or not that's going to work out. But yeah, I mean, it's very much a manual process. And so for all the manual things, we've been trying to slowly automate each and every one of those. And MDM is a great solution for a lot of those. But sometimes you are going to pick the more creative, exciting solution over that.
Yes. That's fantastic. So the suggestion is to have an automated reminder sent to the person who checked out the device daily. It's like, hey, just FYI, this is still in your drawer. Thanks.
And then the question I had was, what frustrations are left? What are you still hoping to solve?
What frustrations are left? There's very few things that so there's a number of things that we haven't figured out how to prevent. MDM is great, but what if the device is turned off or dead in somebody's drawer? I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that MDM will hopefully be able to fix, and maybe by the next time we give this talk, we'll have more of an answer for you. But yeah, I don't know. I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that we really love our community, but everybody's been raised by wolves. And so you, in a way, you have to really be like, son, I am disappointed. And like tell people like, can you just not take the battery out? Because seriously, like, and think about the next person who has to go use the device. So I would say half of it is you know, equipment and devices, and half of it is people.
Yeah, and that's probably why we spent so much time on the usability part of this, is because we found that that's been the most important piece of this in running a lab, is like, how intuitive is it? How easy is it for to do things right? How hard is it to do things wrong? And I think that part of the things that, one of the things that Destiny and I have yet to figure out is what's the right tone? Like, we've been real nice and loving.
Too nice.
And we sent our first, like, disappointed dad email last week. And it was new. It was from Destiny. It was from both of us, and that was new for us. And so I think that we're going to have to figure out that kind of messaging as we go forward. Yeah.
Do you do any testing like outside of mobile? I know that your team specifically is focused on mobile web, but do you have other web developers that have other devices like Mac Minis or other Windows laptops?
So the stuff that's in the lab is for anybody to use, not just for people testing on mobile web, which is why we have like the Dell Latitude for IE testing in the lab. So we're trying to figure out how much we should expand this. One of the things that we're considering incorporating, and this only is tangential to your question, is like AV equipment. If people need to come and like get a Chat 150, should we have this in the lab? Like, what other kinds of things should the lab support? So we're like just starting to explore what other uses the lab can have, but primarily it's for like testing across a spectrum of devices, including laptops that they may not have at their desk. Did that answer your question?
Kind of. Like we're thinking about using Mac Minis to test like different versions of Safari or Chrome, and I know if you could work with that kind of software that support that, or if that thought of other people.
There probably is out there. We haven't researched that. The question was about Mac Minis and testing different browser versions, for example.
You mean on like per device, like a Mac Mini versus a Sony Vaio, or? Oh, okay, yeah, we have a team that does browser testing for sure. I mean, Bernard's team, like Q&A and stuff like that. So because we don't want to buy 100 different computers, we often have VMs that have like 6 different versions of Netscape.
Right, and like VirtualBox is pretty prevalent at Etsy, yeah. Yes.
Have you considered any cloud solutions, not instead of the device lab, but additional to it?
We have considered it. We have yet to go in that direction just because this has been fulfilling our needs. And I think it's really important for people to be testing on physical devices. I think that as we scale, we'll probably start to look more heavily into cloud solutions. Yeah. It's right there. If you go there, it's all there in all of its color. You don't have the jingles, unfortunately. But they're recorded. They're already on the internet somewhere. So you can, they're actually linked to you from that place as well. So if you just want us as a ringtone, you can do that too.
Well, Lara actually made fun of me the other day because when we were rehearsing, I was like, you just go to laraswanson.com/device lab. And she's like, you can just say /device lab. And I was like, I'm old. Yep. Well, we're right on the dot. Oh yeah, one more question.
Yeah, one more question, yeah. Oh, how many developers? Oh my gosh, like 160, 180? I don't know, a lot of people. It's a lot of people. Some number. All right, I think that's it. Thank you all.
Thank
this
you
has been
so
awesome.
much. Also, feel free to come up to us afterwards.